My sister mocked my tiny apartment. Now I own the building she rents from. Hi everyone. Before we get into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel's reach has been dropping a bit, and one of the best ways you can support us is by subscribing. It's quick, free, and helps us keep bringing you new and interesting stories. Your support means the world to us, and together we can grow this channel. Thank you so much. Now let's get to today's story. I'm writing from a temporary account for obvious reasons, and I've changed some details to protect my anonymity. The apartment smelled like old paint and someone else's dreams. Not unpleasant exactly, but that particular scent of spaces that had housed too many transient hopes. A mixture of vanilla candles meant to mask cooking odors, faint traces of previous tenants' perfume lingering in the closet, and that indefinable staleness that comes with windows that don't quite seal properly. I stood in the center of my living room, all 320 square feet of it, watching dust motes dance in the afternoon light that streamed through the single window. The realtor had called it cozy and full of character, which in Manhattan speak meant you'll bang your shin on the coffee table every morning for the rest of your lease. But it was mine. Or rather, it was mine to rent for $1,800 a month, which felt like both highway robbery and a miracle, depending on the day. After the divorce, after losing the job at the consulting firm, after watching my carefully constructed adult life crumble like a house of cards in a gentle breeze, this tiny space represented something precious, a fresh start. The divorce papers were still in a manila envelope on my desk, right next to my laptop where I'd been building something new, something Vivian didn't know about. Vivian, my sister. 3 years older, infinitely more successful, and never one to let me forget either fact. She was coming over today. First time in 8 months, and I already knew exactly how it would go. The same way it had gone since we were children. I was putting fresh sheets on the Murphy bed, because of course I had a Murphy bed, like I was living in a 1940s screwball comedy, when I heard her heels clicking up the 3 flights of stairs. Designer heels, no doubt. Vivian never wore anything that cost less than what I now spent on groceries in a month. The knock was sharp, impatient. Classic Vivian. "Coming!" I called, shoving the bed back into the wall and smoothing down my Target sweater. I'd learned years ago not to dress up for my sister's visits. It only made her criticism more creative. I opened the door to find Vivian in full armor, Chanel suit, Hermes bag, and that particular expression she wore when she was about to dispense wisdom about how I was living my life wrong. "Emma," she said, air kissing past my cheek with the efficiency of someone who'd rather be anywhere else. "This is quaint." She stepped inside, her eyes already cataloging everything wrong with my space. The IKEA furniture, the single window with its view of the brick wall across the alley, the kitchenette that was less efficiency and more afterthought. "Tea?" I offered, because that's what you do. You offer tea to the person who's about to eviscerate your life choices. "God, no. I'm not staying long." She perched on the edge of my sofa like it might contaminate her. "Emma, we need to talk." Here it comes, I thought, the quarterly intervention. "I'm worried about you," she continued, her voice dripping with that particular brand of concern that felt more like judgment wrapped in silk. "This place, this lifestyle. You're 42 years old. Don't you think it's time to get serious about your future?" I busied myself making tea I didn't want just to have something to do with my hands. "I am serious about my future." "Really? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're hiding." She gestured around the apartment like she was presenting evidence in court. "Look at this place, Emma. There's no balcony. The walls are beige, actually. They're not even beige. They're some sad color that gave up on being beige. And is that bathroom door supposed to make that noise when it closes?" The bathroom door did make a noise, a sort of resigned sigh, like it was tired of its own existence. But it was functional, and it was private, and after sharing everything with Richard for 12 years, privacy felt like luxury. "It's temporary," I said, which was true, though not in the way she assumed. Vivian laughed, but there was no humor in it. That's what you said about the job situation. That's what you said about the divorce. That's what you said when you moved in here 8 months ago. Emma, at what point does temporary just become your life? I handed her the tea she didn't want, mostly because it gave me an excuse to sit down. Things take time. Time. She set the cup down without drinking from it. You know what I did when Marcus and I separated? I hired the best lawyer in Manhattan, got half of everything, and bought a condo overlooking Central Park, all in 6 months, because I didn't wait for life to happen to me. Marcus had cheated on her with his secretary, an actual cliché-made flesh, and Vivian had indeed decimated him in the divorce. But she'd also been a senior partner at her law firm with 7 figures in the bank and a prenup that protected her assets. My situation had been different. Richard and I had different circumstances, I said quietly. Richard was a user and you enabled him for 12 years. Vivian's voice had that clinical edge she got when she was delivering what she considered hard truths. You put him through law school, supported him through 3 career changes, and what did you get? A 30-year-old yoga instructor named Serenity and half the debt from his failed restaurant. She wasn't wrong. Richard had been charming and full of dreams, and I'd believed in those dreams right up until I found him exploring advanced poses with his very flexible instructor on our very expensive sofa. But that's in the past, Vivian continued, warming to her theme. What concerns me now is this giving up, this accepting less than you deserve. I almost laughed at that. Accepting less than I deserved had been the theme of my entire childhood, but Vivian had never seemed concerned about it then. I was 8 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with my report card. All A's, except for 1 B in PE because I couldn't climb the rope. I'd been so proud of those A's, had practiced showing them to Mom and Dad, had imagined their faces lighting up with the same pride I felt. Very nice, sweetheart, Mom had said, glancing at the card before turning back to Vivian's art project, some abstract thing made of pasta and glitter that looked like it had been assembled during an earthquake. Vivian, honey, this is so creative. We have to put this on the refrigerator right away. My report card went in the drawer. Vivian's macaroni masterpiece got the place of honor, right at eye level. You're such a good student, Emma, Dad had said later, ruffling my hair absently while watching Vivian practice her piano recital piece badly. So responsible. We never have to worry about you. That had been my role, the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who didn't need attention or praise or encouragement because I was naturally good at taking care of myself. Vivian was the star, the one with big emotions and bigger dreams, the one who needed nurturing and support and constant validation. I got used to being the one who didn't need anything. Emma. Vivian's voice snapped me back to the present. Are you listening to me? Sorry, what? She sighed dramatically. I said, I think you should move back home for a while, just until you get back on your feet. Mom and Dad would love to have you, and their guest room is so much nicer than this. The guest room, where I'd slept during the divorce proceedings, staring at the ceiling while Mom fussed over Vivian's latest crisis, her third husband having the audacity to ask for a prenup in the master suite down the hall. I'm fine where I am, I said. Fine. Vivian stood up, smoothing her skirt. Fine is not the same as good, Emma. Fine is not the same as the life you could have if you just tried harder. Tried harder, as if I hadn't tried, as if the last 18 months hadn't been one long exercise in trying harder than I'd ever tried at anything. After she left, with one final pitying look around my apartment and a promise to check in soon, I sat in the gathering darkness and thought about trying harder. I thought about the laptop on my desk and the spreadsheets that lived inside it, numbers that told a story Vivian didn't know, couldn't know, because I'd learned long ago that the things I cared about most were safer when I kept them to myself. The real estate market in Manhattan was brutal, but it was also predictable if you knew how to read it. Commercial properties, especially older buildings in transitional neighborhoods, followed patterns. Rent-stabilized tenants moved out or passed away, creating opportunities for renovation and rent increases. Buildings changed hands when owners got tired of dealing with city regulations and maintenance costs. I'd been watching one building in particular for 6 months. A pre-war beauty in Tribeca with good bones and better potential. 12 units, mostly rent-stabilized, with a ground-floor retail space that had been vacant for 2 years. The owner was an elderly man in Queens who'd inherited it from his father and seemed to view it more as a burden than an asset. I'd been building a portfolio, slowly, carefully. Not the flashy kind of investing that made headlines, but the quiet kind that made fortunes. A small apartment building in Washington Heights, a duplex in Astoria that I'd bought from a burned-out landlord, a commercial space in Long Island City that I'd leased to a tech startup. It had taken everything I had left after the divorce, plus a loan against my 401k, plus sleep and social life and anything resembling a normal existence. But it was working. The Tribeca building would be the crown jewel, if I could make the numbers work. I opened my laptop and pulled up the spreadsheet I'd been living with for months. Purchase price, renovation costs, projected rents, financing options. I'd run the numbers so many times I could do it in my sleep. My phone buzzed. A text from my real estate attorney. Owner accepted the offer. Congratulations, you own a building in Tribeca. I stared at the message for a long time, waiting to feel something. Triumph, maybe, or vindication. Instead, I felt strangely calm, like a piece had finally clicked into place in a puzzle I'd been working on my entire life. I poured myself a glass of wine, the good bottle I'd been saving for a special occasion, and walked to my single window. The brick wall across the alley looked the same as always, but somehow the view felt different. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of transferring ownership, of dealing with the tenants and the inevitable renovation headaches. Tonight, I was just going to sit in my tiny apartment and enjoy the fact that somewhere across town, in a building worth more than most people made in a decade, there was a deed with my name on it. I didn't call anyone. I didn't post about it on social media. I just sat with the knowledge, the way I'd learned to sit with all the important things in my life quietly, privately, without needing anyone else's validation to make it real. 3 weeks later, I was in my office. The desk in the corner of my studio apartment that served as headquarters for my growing real estate empire. When my phone rang, it was a number I didn't recognize, but the voice was familiar. Emma, it's Vivian. I need to talk to you. Something weird happened today. Weird how? With my apartment. You know I've been renting that place in Tribeca for the past 2 years? The one with the amazing kitchen and the view of the Hudson? I knew. She'd posted about it extensively on Instagram, had thrown dinner parties there, had made sure everyone in our family knew exactly how much she was paying for it and how it was such a good investment in her quality of life. What about it? Well, the management company called today. Apparently, the building sold, and the new owner wants to meet with all the tenants to discuss lease renewals. They're sending someone over tomorrow. That's not that weird. Buildings sell all the time. I know, but it's the timing. I just had this conversation with my lawyer about possibly buying the apartment, converting it to a condo, and now suddenly there's new ownership? It feels suspicious. I made sympathetic noises while pulling up the file on my laptop. Vivian lived in apartment 7B, a 2-bedroom with river views that rented for $4,500 a month. She was a good tenant, according to the management company. Always paid on time, didn't cause problems, treated the space well. I'm sure it's fine, I said. New owners usually want to maintain good relationships with existing tenants. I hope so. I love this place, Emma. It's the first time I've felt really settled since the divorce. The thought of having to move. Her voice trailed off, and for a moment she sounded less like my imperious older sister and more like someone who was genuinely worried about losing something she cared about. It'll work out, I said, and meant it. The next evening, I dressed carefully. Business casual, professional, but not intimidating. I'd learned that people responded better when you looked competent but approachable. Power dressing was for people who needed their clothes to do the talking for them. The building was even more beautiful than I'd expected. Pre-war elegance with modern amenities, a doorman who nodded politely as I entered, marble floors that had been recently restored. My building. It still felt surreal. Vivian's apartment was on the 7th floor, and I took the elevator up with butterflies in my stomach that had nothing to do with height. I'd been planning this conversation for weeks, but now that it was actually happening, I felt oddly nervous. She answered the door in her usual armor designer jeans instead of a suit, but designer nonetheless, and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my monthly rent. "You must be from the management company," she said, extending a manicured hand. "I'm Vivian Crawford." "Actually," I said, shaking her hand, "I'm Emma Thompson, your sister, and your new landlord." The color drained from her face so quickly I thought she might faint. "What?" "I bought the building 3 weeks ago. I own your apartment now. May I come in? We should probably discuss your lease renewal." She stepped back automatically, her mouth opening and closing like a fish. I walked past her into the apartment I'd been paying for without her knowledge for exactly 23 days. It was beautiful, I had to admit. High ceilings, hardwood floors, those river views she was always posting about. The furniture was all Vivian expensive, perfectly coordinated, the kind of effortless sophistication that actually required enormous effort and money. "This is impossible," she said finally. "You can't. You don't have..." "How?" I settled onto her sofa. My sofa, technically, and pulled out the folder I'd brought. "It's all here. Deed, transfer documents, building inspection reports. Would you like to see them?" She snatched the papers from my hands, scanning them with the speed of someone whose legal training was finally being put to use. I watched her face as the reality sank in. Her struggling baby sister, the one who lived in a studio apartment and shopped at Target, owned the building she'd been bragging about for 2 years. "This doesn't make sense," she said, but her voice had lost its conviction. "Where did you get the money?" "I earned it." "Doing what? You don't have a job." "I have several jobs, actually. I buy buildings, renovate them, and rent them out. It's called real estate investment. You might have heard of it." She sat down heavily in the chair across from me, still clutching the papers. "Since when?" "Since about 3 years ago. Started small, built up a portfolio, reinvested the profits. Basic capitalism." "But you never said anything. All this time, when I was trying to help you, giving you advice about getting your life together. You were giving me advice about conforming to your idea of what success looks like. I was building my own version." The silence stretched between us. Outside, the Hudson River glittered in the late afternoon sun, and I could see why she loved this place. It was the kind of apartment that made you feel successful just by living in it, the kind of space that photographed beautifully for social media. "How many buildings?" she asked finally. "6 now. This is the biggest." "6." She said it like she was testing the word. "And you never told anyone." "Who would I tell? You? Mom and Dad? So you could all explain to me why I was doing it wrong?" That hit home. I could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her perfectly applied lipstick seemed to thin as she pressed her lips together. "We never said you were doing things wrong. You said I was hiding. You said I was giving up. You said I needed to try harder, get serious about my future." I kept my voice level, conversational. After all these years, the hurt had crystallized into something harder and clearer than anger. What you meant was that I needed to do things the way you would do them, get a big corporate job, marry someone successful, buy the right brands, live in the right neighborhoods. That's not... Vivian, 3 hours ago you called this apartment the first time you've felt really settled since your divorce. You've been living here for 2 years. Do you know how long I've owned this building? She shook her head. 3 weeks. Which means for the past 3 weeks, I've been your landlord. I've been getting reports about how quiet and respectful you are, how you always pay your rent on time, how you take good care of the property. I've been proud of you as a tenant. The irony wasn't lost on either of us. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Are you going to evict me? Jack up the rent? This is your revenge?" "Revenge for what?" For all of it. For the way we treated you growing up, for not supporting you after the divorce, for always making you feel like the unsuccessful one. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Fear. My successful, confident, imperious older sister was afraid of me. "I don't want revenge," I said. "I want to offer you a 5-year lease at your current rent, with annual increases tied to inflation instead of market rate. I want to upgrade your kitchen appliances and refinish the hardwood floors. I want you to be happy here, because happy tenants take care of buildings, and taking care of buildings is good business. You're offering me a deal? I'm offering you exactly what I'd offer any good tenant." She was quiet for a long time, staring out at the river view that was somehow both hers and mine now. "I don't understand you," she said finally. "You never tried to." Another silence, longer this time. "Mom and Dad are going to freak out when they find out." "Are you going to tell them?" She laughed, and for the first time in years it sounded genuine. "Are you kidding? I'm never going to live this down. My baby sister owns my building. They're going to want to know why I didn't know. Why you didn't tell me, how you managed to buy real estate in Tribeca when you're supposed to be the family screw-up." "I'm not a screw-up." "No," she said, looking at me with something that might have been respect. "You're definitely not." I pulled out a pen and set it on the coffee table next to the lease renewal documents I'd brought. "Take some time to think about it. The lease doesn't expire for another month." But she picked up the pen immediately, scanning the terms with her lawyer's eye, before signing with a flourish. 5 years, she said, with an option to renew. With an option to renew. I gathered up the papers, slid them back into my folder, and stood to leave. At the door, I paused. "Vivian?" "Yeah?" "For what it's worth, this really is a beautiful apartment. You have good taste." She smiled, and for a moment she looked like the sister I'd idolized when we were children, before I learned that idolizing her meant diminishing myself. "Emma?" "Yeah?" "I'm sorry for all of it. I didn't know. I never realized that my trying to help felt like judgment. I thought I was protecting you." "From what?" "From ending up like me, I guess. Successful on paper, but starting over at 45 because I never learned how to build something real, something lasting." She gestured around the apartment that was no longer quite as much hers as it had been an hour ago. "This place, my job, my whole life, it's all about maintaining appearances, what you've done, building something from nothing, creating actual value. That's real success." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded and let myself out. The elevator ride down felt longer than the ride up, and I found myself looking at my reflection in the polished brass doors. I looked the same as I had an hour ago, same Target sweater, same drugstore lipstick, same hair that I cut myself to save money, but something fundamental had shifted. 3 months later, I was having coffee with my contractor in the building's lobby when Vivian walked through with a man I didn't recognize. She introduced him to the doorman as her boyfriend, an environmental lawyer who worked for the city. He looked at her like she'd hung the moon, and she looked genuinely happy in a way I hadn't seen since we were kids. She spotted me across the lobby and came over, bringing the boyfriend with her. "Emma, I want you to meet David. David, this is my sister Emma. She owns the building." The pride in her voice when she said it was unmistakable. Not embarrassment, not resentment, but genuine pride. "Wow," David said, shaking my hand. "Vivian talks about you all the time, says you're some kind of real estate genius." I laughed. "Hardly. I just got lucky with good timing and cheap money." "Don't let her fool you," Vivian said. "She bought this place from under my nose and I didn't even know it. Now I live in fear that she's going to decide she needs the top floor for herself and evict me." But she was smiling when she said it, and I was smiling when I replied, "Your lease is ironclad. You're stuck here for 4 more years. Good thing I like the place." After they left, heading out for what looked like a romantic dinner, my contractor asked, "Family? Sister? She seems nice." "She is," I said, and realized I meant it. She always was. We just needed to figure out how to be siblings instead of competitors. "And the building? You're really not going to jack up her rent?" I looked around the lobby I'd spent a small fortune renovating, at the doorman who now recognized me and nodded respectfully when I came and went, at the mailboxes that held the names of tenants who trusted me to maintain their homes. "She's a good tenant," I said, "and good tenants are worth more than market rate." That night, I sat in my studio apartment which I'd kept, even though I could afford something bigger now, because I'd grown attached to its modest certainty, and looked at my laptop screen. The spreadsheets had multiplied, representing properties across 3 boroughs, income streams that had taken on lives of their own, a business that had grown beyond my wildest projections. My phone buzzed, a text from Mom. "Vivian told us about your real estate business. So proud of you, sweetheart. Dad wants to know if you need investors." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to untangle the emotions it stirred up. Pride, yes. Vindication, but also something sadder and more complicated, the knowledge that their pride was contingent on my success being the kind they could understand and quantify. They'd been proud of Vivian when she made partner, when she bought her condo, when she married rich men and threw expensive parties. They'd worried about me when I lived quietly, when I made choices that prioritized stability over status, when I measured success in ways that didn't translate to dinner party conversation. Now that my success looked like theirs, property ownership, investment income, the kind of wealth that impressed their friends, suddenly I was worth being proud of. I typed and deleted 6 responses before settling on, "Thanks. I'm happy to tell you more about it when I see you." Because I was happy to tell them about it. Not because I needed their validation anymore, but because I'd learned something valuable in the process of building this life. Success shared is success multiplied, but only when the sharing comes from abundance rather than need. I'd spent so many years starving for their approval, for Vivian's respect, for recognition of my worth. But worth isn't something other people can give you. It's something you build, quietly and persistently, one good decision at a time. 6 months later, I moved out of the studio apartment. Not to something flashy, I'm still not a flashy person, but to a 1-bedroom in one of my buildings with a real kitchen and a view of something other than brick wall. The day I moved, Vivian came to help. She brought David, who turned out to be surprisingly handy with a moving truck and several bags of Thai food. "I can't believe you're leaving this place," she said, looking around the empty studio. "It's so... you? What's that supposed to mean?" "Efficient. No wasted space. Everything serving a purpose." She ran her hand along the windowsill where I'd kept a small succulent garden. "I always thought it was too small, but now I think maybe it was exactly the right size for what you needed to do here." "Which was?" "Figure out who you were when no one was watching." We stood in the empty space for a moment, listening to David wrestle with the Murphy bed in the hallway. "Are you happy?" she asked. It was such a simple question, but I realized no one had asked me that in years. Not during the divorce, not during the job search, not during any of the times when people were offering advice about how to fix my life. "Yeah," I said, "I actually am." "Good," she said, "you deserve to be." We loaded the last of my boxes into David's truck and drove across town to my new apartment. It wasn't much bigger than the old one, but it felt spacious in ways that had nothing to do with square footage. The windows faced east, toward the sunrise, and there was room for a small table where I could eat breakfast while reviewing the day's business. That night, after Vivian and David left and I'd unpacked enough boxes to find my coffee maker and laptop, I sat at my new table and opened the spreadsheet I'd been working on for weeks. Building number 7, a small apartment complex in Queens, nothing fancy but solid and well located. The numbers worked, the financing was in place, and the current owner was motivated to sell. I'd learned that the secret to real estate wasn't finding the perfect property. It was finding the property that was perfect for your specific goals at your specific moment. This building wouldn't win any architectural awards, but it would house families and generate steady income and give me another piece of the puzzle I was still assembling. My phone rang. Unknown number, but I answered anyway. "Emma Thompson?" "Yes." "This is Margaret Chen from Chen Associates. We represent the estate of Bernard Kowalski. He owned a building on East 85th Street that we believe you might be interested in purchasing. I grabbed a pen and started taking notes. By the time I hung up, I was looking at building number 8. Some people build empires loudly, with fanfare and press releases and social media announcements. I was building mine quietly, one tenant at a time, one lease renewal at a time, one carefully calculated investment at a time. And for the first time in my life, quiet felt like exactly the right volume for success. The last time I saw Richard was at a coffee shop in Soho, 6 months after my 8th building purchase. He looked older, softer around the edges, wearing the kind of expensive casual clothes that suggested Serenity had expensive tastes. "Emma," he said, standing awkwardly by my table, "Wow, you look great." I did look great. Not because I'd lost weight or changed my hair or bought expensive clothes, but because I looked like myself in a way I never had when we were married. Confident, settled, complete. "Thank you. How are you?" "Good. Great, actually. Serenity and I opened a second studio in Brooklyn. Business is really taking off." He sat down without being invited, the way he used to do when we were married, and he assumed he was welcome everywhere I was. "That's wonderful. What about you? Are you seeing anyone?" I almost laughed. Richard had never asked what I was doing professionally, never wondered how I was supporting myself, never thought to question how someone who'd been just a consultant's wife had managed to land on her feet so completely after our divorce. "I'm focused on work right now." "Still consulting?" "Real estate." "Oh, like selling houses? That's great, Emma. I always knew you'd be good with people." I sipped my coffee and studied the man I'd spent 12 years of my life with. He genuinely didn't know, had no idea that the woman sitting across from him owned more property than he'd ever dreamed of, that I'd built a business more successful than any of his ventures, that I was happier alone than I'd ever been with him. "Something like that," I said. "Listen, I wanted to apologize for how things ended. I know it wasn't. I could have handled it better. We both could have. But I want you to know, what we had was real. You were the best wife I could have asked for. You supported me through everything, believed in me when no one else did. I'll always be grateful for that." And there it was, the worldview that had defined our marriage. I was the supporter, the believer, the one whose job it was to make his dreams possible. It had never occurred to him to ask what my dreams were, or to support them if I'd had the courage to voice them. "I hope you're happy," I said, and meant it. "I am. Serenity is. She's amazing, so passionate, so alive. She pushes me to be better. That's what partners should do." He smiled, that same charming smile that had won me over 20 years ago. "What about you? Anyone special?" "I'm working on it." He left after extracting a promise to stay in touch, which we both knew we wouldn't keep. I watched him walk away, shoulders straight, probably already thinking about the story he'd tell Serenity about running into his ex-wife and how well he'd handled it. I thought about the woman I'd been when I was married to him, always asking what he needed, what he wanted, how I could help him achieve his goals. It had never occurred to me that I could have goals of my own, let alone pursue them without his approval or participation. The woman I was now owned 8 buildings across 3 boroughs. She had a business plan for the next 5 years and a retirement account that was actually going to let her retire. She woke up in the morning excited about the day ahead, instead of anxious about what crisis she'd need to manage. She was alone, but she wasn't lonely. She had work she loved, family relationships that were honest instead of performative, and a future that belonged entirely to her. I walked home through Soho, past the boutiques and galleries and restaurants that catered to people who wanted to be seen being successful. My apartment was 20 blocks north, in a neighborhood that was more about living than being seen, and I had a spreadsheet to update and tenant calls to return. It wasn't the life anyone had planned for me, including myself. But it was the life I'd built, brick by brick, decision by decision, quiet triumph by quiet triumph, and it was enough.